In the 1930s, Hermann Göring, chief of Nazi Germany's Luftwaffe, created the most fearsome air force the world had ever seen. Göring's bombers and fighters overwhelmed Poland, Belgium, Holland, Denmark, Norway, and France. In August of 1940, Germany's Luftwaffe turned its full might against Great Britain. In what Winston Churchill would call his nation's finest hour, Britain's Royal Air Force rose to challenge the Nazi threat. The epic confrontation became known as the Battle of Britain. By June of 1940, the German army had completed its conquest of Western Europe. Adolf Hitler, supremely confident, now turned his attention across the English Channel. A German invasion force began taking shape, with supplies pouring in from across Nazi Europe. But there was more than the English Channel standing in their way. Hugh Dowding, Britain's Royal Air Force chief, had the RAF in prime fighting condition. They would take to the air and thwart any German invasion force heading across the Channel. Göring needed control of the skies before the Germans could land on English soil. The flamboyant Luftwaffe leader, known for having an ego as enormous as his appetite, vowed to bring the RAF to its knees. After all, he had twice as many planes as the British. Among them was the lightning-quick Messerschmitt 109 fighter, considered the most deadly aircraft in the world. Göring's bombers, including the Dornier 17, were equally feared, having demolished most of Europe's other air forces before they got off the ground. Göring's plan was to strike at the heart of Britain's air defense, wipe out air command centers and airstrips, destroy RAF planes while they were still on the ground. With their runways, repair facilities, and headquarters crippled, the RAF would be useless. Then the land invasion, codenamed Operation Sea Lion, would begin. 250,000 German soldiers would cross the 31-mile channel and invade southern England. British soldiers braced for the invasion, while Prime Minister Winston Churchill offered words of defiance in an historic radio address.
We shall defend our island, whatever the cost may be. We shall fight on beaches, landing grounds, in fields, in streets, and on the hills. We shall never surrender.
To defend their skies, the British stepped up production on planes, such as the Hawker Hurricane, slower than the German Messerschmitt, but able to reach higher altitudes. Chief among British fighters was the Spitfire. With a Rolls-Royce engine, the Spitfire was every bit as fast and maneuverable as the Messerschmitt, as the Germans would soon learn. A key advantage for the British was radar. Developed throughout the 1930s, British radar could locate the Luftwaffe before they reached their targets. Time and again, the RAF would surprise the cocky German pilots who had yet to face a major challenge in the skies. On August 13, 1940, proclaimed Eagle Day by the Nazi High Command, the Battle of Britain was officially launched. Nazi bombers and fighters flew 1,500 missions across the Channel that day, attacking British airstrips, factories, and ports. But the British too enjoyed success. Thanks to their radar, the RAF anticipated the Luftwaffe's every move. The Germans suffered heavy losses on their self-proclaimed Eagle Day. "34 German planes were shot down, while the Brits lost but 13. In the first confrontation in the Battle of Britain, the RAF emerged victorious. But it was just the beginning. The British also benefited from a home field advantage. They could easily rescue their downed pilots, who would soon fight again. Downed German pilots, on the other hand, remained grounded in POW camps, never again to return to battle. Throughout August, the Germans maintained their attack, launching strike after strike from hidden staging points in France. British pilots stayed on duty around the clock while waiting for the next raid. Often pilots returning from one sortie barely had time to catch their breath before returning to the skies. These RAF pilots keenly felt the pressure. The fate of England rested on their shoulders. Through the summer of 1940, British pilots downed German planes at a ratio of almost 2-to-1. But British airplane production was falling behind the Germans, and the RAF's smaller force of pilots were overworked and weary. In Germany, Göring was impatient for the battle to end. He inspired his pilots by telling them that the RAF was on its last legs and only their final defeat was holding up the invasion. On August 24th, an accidental bombing would prove the pivot point in the Battle of Britain. A small group of German bombers heading for an English military target flew off course. They mistakenly dropped their bombs on the heart of London. Ordinary people were struck down heading home from work, a pub, or a movie house. Until now, Londoners had been spared, but within this carnage, Winston Churchill saw an opportunity. If he could goad the Nazis into attacking London, RAF bases across England would have time to rebuild, RAF pilots time to rest and regroup. The next day, to provoke the Germans, Churchill ordered a retaliatory raid. The anti-Semitic Göring had been quoted as saying, "If bombs fall on Berlin, my name is Meyer." But during the night, RAF bombers struck at the German capital. The bombing humiliated Göring and Hitler and inflamed them into acting rashly. A furious Hitler fell into Churchill's trap. In a public address, he vowed that for every bomb to fall on Berlin, 10 times as many would be dropped on London. Meeting in Berlin, Hitler and Göring changed their strategy of bombing military targets to one of terror bombing London. On September 7, 1940, Londoners looked up to find swarms of German bombers on the horizon. For the first time, instead of splitting up and attacking military targets, the Luftwaffe converged en masse over London. The German bombs turned London into an inferno. Hundreds of people were killed and thousands were left homeless. London's firefighters fought valiantly but were ill prepared for the German firebombings. Nothing was sacred as the Luftwaffe returned again and again in what was called the London Blitz. But while the bombs fell, the RAF seized the opportunity to repair airstrips and airplanes and refresh weary pilots. The bombings had another important consequence. The scenes of London in flames touched a chord in America's heart and turned American public opinion against isolationism. At night, many Londoners slept in the relative safety of their subway system while bombs rained down from overhead. In the morning, however, it was business as usual. Most Londoners stayed on their jobs throughout the Blitz and contributed everything they could to the war effort. While London withstood the Luftwaffe's fury, the Royal Air Force made a remarkable recovery. Well-rested Spitfire crews now engaged Messerschmitts in dogfights over London's rooftops in full view of the thousands below. Londoners even kept score as the RAF gained the upper hand. On September 15, 1940, a day known to the British as the Battle of Britain Day, the RAF won another momentous victory in the sky, crushing Germany's invasion plans. Spitfires and Hurricane fighters were directed by radar towards droves of German planes as they crossed the channel. Radar had again given the RAF the edge. This time, 56 German planes were shot down and dozens more damaged. It was the battle that broke the Luftwaffe's back. At his private office in Berlin, Adolf Hitler learned of the defeat. Hitler had to launch his invasion of Britain soon before winter weather made the Channel uncrossable. But fearing now it would be months before the RAF could be conquered, the invasion was canceled. History had taken a dramatic turn. The mighty Nazi war machine had met its first defeat. It was the first crucial turning point of World War II. In the Battle of Britain, the bold and brave of the Royal Air Force had saved their nation and perhaps the world.
Never in the field of human conflict was so much owed by so many to so few.